It was a chilly autumn evening in the small town of Pinecrest, where the old Miller mansion had been abandoned for years. The house was infamous for its gruesome history. A wealthy family had vanished overnight, leaving behind nothing but bloodstains and whispered rumors of a terrible curse. Despite countless attempts to sell it, no one dared to live there. But recently, the mansion had been reopened as a new attraction, the haunted house experience. Sam, Lucy, Eric, and Kate, a group of high school friends, were always on the lookout for the next thrill. They'd seen the flyers around town advertising the haunted house, and eager for a scare, decided to be the first to brave its doors. As they approached the mansion, fog rolled across the grounds, and the air was heavy with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. The front door creaked open as they approached, revealing a darkened hallway lined with old portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them. They were greeted by a man in a tattered butler's uniform, pale and gaunt, with a chillingly hollow smile. "Welcome to your doom," he said in a low voice before disappearing into the shadows. They laughed it off, assuming it was part of the show, and ventured deeper into the house. The first room was a twisted parlor, decorated with cobwebs, dusty furniture, and flickering candles. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The windows, now covered with thick iron bars, left no escape. The air turned cold and an unsettling feeling washed over them. Lucy's eyes darted to the paintings on the walls. They weren't just portraits, they were moving, their expressions twisting in pain and horror. One painting depicted a woman in a white dress, her eyes wide with terror, staring directly at Lucy. The image seemed to breathe, the woman's fingers slowly reaching out of the frame. Lucy screamed, backing away, but her friends laughed nervously, thinking it was an elaborate trick. They didn't realize that the woman's eyes were watching them, hungry and vengeful. Eric, ever the skeptic, suggested they move to the next room, confident that it was just part of the experience. But as they crossed the threshold, they found themselves in a grand dining hall, its long table set with rotten food and broken glasses. At the head of the table sat a life-size doll dressed in old-fashioned clothes, its head turned slightly as if it were looking at them. The chandelier above flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Sam noticed something strange, a grandfather clock in the corner, ticking faster and faster. He watched as the hands spun wildly, and then, with a deafening chime, it stopped at midnight. The room went dark. The doll's head snapped up, and its eyes glowed a sinister red. A chilling wind whipped through the room, and ghostly whispers filled the air, speaking in a language none of them understood. The walls began to close in, the wallpaper peeling away to reveal a writhing mass of shadows. Eric tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Kate pulled at the windows, but they were sealed shut. The house was alive, and it didn't want them to leave. Suddenly, they heard footsteps above them, slow and deliberate, pacing back and forth. They looked up to see dark figures moving behind the ceiling, as if people were trapped inside the very walls. A door they hadn't noticed before creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled down into the basement. Desperate for a way out, they descended the stairs, only to find themselves in a dimly lit room filled with old toys, broken furniture, and a large mirror covered with a black cloth. The mirror seemed out of place, too new and untouched by the decay around it. Drawn to it, Kate hesitated before pulling the cloth away. The mirror didn't show their reflections. Instead, it displayed the Miller family trapped inside, their faces twisted in terror, banging on the glass as if pleading for release. Kate stumbled back, but it was too late. The mirror began to pulse, drawing them in with an invisible force. They tried to look away, but their eyes were locked onto the scene. The Millers were not alone. The faces of countless others appeared behind them, all trapped within the mirror's surface, their hands pressing against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. A cold hand grabbed Kate's arm, pulling her closer to the mirror. She looked down to see the ghostly figure of a child, pale and hollow-eyed, begging her to stay. The others tried to pull her away, but the room started to spin, the walls warping and stretching as the mirror's pull grew stronger. Sam smashed the mirror with a nearby chair, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. But instead of breaking, the shards hung in the air, floating and rearranging themselves into a new, larger mirror. The reflection that stared back was not their own. It was the butler, smiling that same hollow smile, now joined by the twisted figures of the Millers and the countless others trapped forever in the mansion's grasp. The house shuddered, and the basement doors burst open, throwing the teens back into the dining hall. The doll was gone, replaced by the butler, who silently gestured towards the front door. They didn't wait for another invitation. Racing past him, they bolted out of the mansion, the heavy door slamming shut behind them with a finality that echoed in their bones. Breathless and shaken, they looked back at the house. It stood silent and still, as if nothing had happened. But they knew what they'd seen. As they walked away, the mansion's windows flickered, and for a brief moment they saw their own reflections staring back at them, eyes hollow, faces twisted in silent screams, trapped forever in the haunted house that fed on fear and never let go. From that night on, the Miller Mansion was more than just an attraction. It became a legend, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and where those brave enough to enter might never truly escape.